Welcome to another episode of the Endurance Matters podcast. I am really happy to have Mirinda Carfrae in the studio today. Mirinda, welcome.
Thanks, Justin. Good to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, I start off the podcast with the icebreaker question. The question today is, you have 4 world titles, 3 Ironman and 170.3, 3 children, Izzy, Finn, and Jameson. Who are 2 people you love as much as your kids, and 1 thing you value as much as your world championship trophies or bowls?
Oh, gosh. 2 people. Well, my husband, Tim. Love him as much as my kids, but I don't know that there's anyone else I love as much. I mean, honestly, I don't know. You have to have kids to understand it. Yeah, so, obviously Tim's in there, but outside of that, it's a big step before the next person.
Tim twice.
Yeah. Melvin, no, he's not even close. It's our dog, our little Frenchie.
And 1 thing you value as much as your world championship trophies?
I don't know if I value those trophies as much as I just, I don't know. I feel like I can't come up with anything that's as important. If we're talking other trophies, I'd say my Roth Lion. But honestly, all of that's just stuff.
Yeah.
When you talk about family and kids and stuff like that, like that, they're what matters, and everything else is just stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, typically in the podcast, I start from the beginning, but I have a lot to get through today. Okay. So I think maybe because your career is so long, I want to start maybe like where we are today. So just like generally, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah. Jameson's a little over 1 now. Finn just turned 4 a couple of weeks ago, and Izzy's, she was telling me this morning, almost 7.5. So she's a big girl now. A few years removed from the sport of racing professionally, and I feel like I'm sort of settling into my post-racing career. Obviously, I retired, then got pregnant again, and so my life has really revolved around the kids and still will revolve around the kids. But in terms of like who I am and what my passions are outside of parenting, obviously that's a big passion of mine, but really enjoying, the commentary side of things, coaching as well. We've started Salty Bears, which is our training group, our triathlon team, and really enjoying that and sort of helping our athletes achieve their goals now. And I feel that is pretty fulfilling, or as close as I can get to what it felt like for me to chase those goals down. So sharing that journey with our athletes is a lot of fun, and that's enough for me. And honestly, I'm just trying to get myself back in shape after having Jameson. My fitness obviously has taken a back seat. Now I'm like, okay, I'm realizing that I need to be in really good shape to feel my best, to be my best. And so this year the project is getting mom back in peak shape so that I can just feel my best and again, just do my best in every aspect of life.
Yeah, that's one thing I was definitely thinking about quite a lot is, as professional athletes, you get so used to that sort of like daily dopamine hit or multiple times daily of like executing a hard workout. Okay, on to the next. Like, are you missing that now? Are you trying to fill that?
A little bit. I mean, I don't miss the grind that much. I'm obviously trained for over 20 years and never fortunately had any injuries. So I didn't have any I had downtime that was only programmed in. That's a long time of just consistent swim, bike, run. And I loved it. And it was amazing in the moment, but I don't want to go back and do that again. Now I like a good balance of, yes, I think for me, having some physical activity 6 days a week is important. Helps me feel good, get that dopamine hit, as you mentioned. And I think it's just good for my mental health and obviously physical health. That's kind of it. I mean, I sort of see myself in the future pushing running a little bit more. I'd love to go and do like the world majors and try and run decently fast, as a masters athlete, maybe the 50 plus age group or maybe the 45 plus age group. I'm not sure yet, but that's sort of like a little goal of mine in the back of my mind. But from now, just sort of entering sort of fun competitions, having sort of races on the calendar to help me stay motivated and on task as well.
Do you think that just gives you maybe a sense of normalcy because, your whole life that's just how the thought process is oriented. Like, okay, pick a race, put that on the schedule, make your life sort of revolve around that. Do you still feel like you need to have that in order to feel normal?
Yeah, I didn't think that I would need to have that, but I found that when I do have an event or a race on the calendar, it just gives me focus and allows me to then build out a training plan and stick to that training plan. When I don't have a race on the calendar, it's very easy. If mums out there can certainly attest to this. When you have kids, obviously they come first 99.9% of the time, and it's very easy for them to be like, oh, Mum, can you come and do this with me? Don't go for a run. Like you get that asked of you a lot. And I think when there isn't a race or a reason, I'm like, oh, yeah, sure, I don't need to go run anymore. I'm retired. And Tim certainly said that a lot of times since he's retired. I don't need to go run. Let's just go play, kick the football in the backyard. And there's a lot of that. And we make sure we do spend a lot of time with the kids. But I'm realizing that for me, I do a better job of parenting. I'm more patient and calm with the children if I've just had that, hour to myself at some point in the day. Like that just gives so much more to me so that I can be a better mom. And I mean, it's not like I'm super cranky if I don't exercise. I notice I have a little bit less patience with the kids. So, and honestly, as I said, everything revolves around their needs and what they need. But if I can just have like an hour a day, that just goes such a long way.
No, 100%. What does your day in the life look like in 2025?
Yeah, so basically I, co-sleep with the little guy. I sort of try to sneak out of bed before he wakes up, get myself maybe a few minutes of quiet before all the kids get up. But honestly, they're pretty much up right around when I am. And so it's just getting them ready for school, feeding them, getting them dressed. Usually Tim might do a workout in the morning or he might be on calls or whatever. So it sort of falls on me to get them ready in the morning. And it's no easy task. They have their, certainly Isabel does not have time on her mind or is ever in a rush to get out the door. So I'm always like trying to get them out the door on time. So that's sort of a hustle in the morning. And then I usually drop the kids off at school and then I'll go work out. So Izzy and Finn, I have our Melinda come in, our nanny, or Tim will be able to watch Jameson while I go do something. And so drop them off at school, I'll go to the gym or I'll go run, basically Monday to Friday. That's my plan. After that, I come home and then I get to some office work. So either coaching athletes, usually check in with my athletes, see what's going on, make sure workouts are getting done appropriately, see if there's any needs there. And then from there, it's sort of other admin, so running a household, getting groceries, doing laundry, cleaning the house, like just, general keep the house running smoothly stuff. So that sort of takes up the rest of my day. And then Finn's only half day, so pick him up at 11:45. Usually go back to, some more office work or whatever after he gets home. And then Izzy's home at 3:30. And from then I'm back to mum mode. So it's just hang out with the kids, feed the kids, play with the kids, then cook dinner and go to bed. Do it all again the next day.
It sounds like it's, if not as busier than maybe what it is as the professional athlete life.
100% it's busier. Absolutely. There's not really a minute that's not accounted for in some way. And I do, try to find, as I said, those few minutes in the morning of quiet or in the day when no one's around is a very rare occurrence where there's no one around or the baby's asleep and I'm in the house by myself. And they're those like Zen moments where I can just switch off for a minute. But that's part of parenting. It's what I signed up for. And we didn't have one child, we had three. And because we love the chaos and we love, everything that being a family brings to our lives. So, we signed up for this and I'm here for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about this actually with my previous guest, who's a father as well. And I've been taking on a lot more now, like business-wise and, doing the podcast. And I don't have kids, but I feel like I have a lot of minutes in the day that are accounted for. And I feel like when I go out to train, I have a lot more like appreciation for that time now, and I'm sure it's just tenfold when you have kids. So
yeah, totally. Yeah. I think back to my racing days and I felt like I was busy then, but I got to watch Netflix all the time. I got to sit in the Normatec booths, there was a lot of chill time, but that was part of the job too.
For sure.
It really isn't a minute that isn't unaccounted for when you are a professional athlete because the recovery you go into massage, you go into physio, maybe you're sitting on the couch in the Norma Protect boots watching Netflix is part of being a professional athlete. And
sure.
that was amazing. But yeah, now it's different. There's no Netflix watching anymore.
Yeah. You mentioned previously that you don't miss a ton about being a professional athlete. You did that for a long time. Is there one thing, though, that you look back on and you're like, oh, man, I actually do kind of miss that? Maybe it's the Netflix?
No, I loved just being fit. I mean, just that feeling like going into a big race, knowing you've, done all the training, left no stone unturned. And obviously I always think back to my big races in Kona, being in Kona that week and just being like in unbelievable shape. Like that is what I miss, like doing the work and then having that reward. It's sort of, and obviously the race itself, the competition, going through all of that, but really just that feeling. And I tell my athletes now, like, appreciate what you've done. Like, you do the Ironman, you mess yourself up, you're a mess for a week after. But it's that fleeting, like, week of I'm in amazing form right now. I can go run. I feel great. I'm bouncing off the walls. And yeah, I just miss that feeling.
Yeah, 100%. It's hard to replicate that feeling.
Yes.
I've got an entire Kona section that I want to circle back to later.
Yep.
But one area that I definitely want to dive into first and foremost is sort of just your experience with training and racing. So the first question that I have is, you famously worked with Siri Lindley for a long time. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to talk about and hear about how you got connected with Siri and when you guys started working together.
Oh, yeah. So I had a coach. So when I first started the sport, I met some triathletes at the gym and they had a triathlon coach and he asked me to do a triathlon. And so he was my first triathlon coach. He wasn't an emotionally stable person. And so that kind of went awry after a few years. And I left him after like 4 or 5 years and I was looking for a coach. And Siri actually wasn't even on my radar. But I guess in 2005, I came to Boulder for the first time. And that's sort of, I'd actually raced Siri in some ITU races, obviously not really raced. She was winning and I was a junior just for the first time getting starts at World Cup races. So I was like getting lapped out on the bike and she was winning. So I knew who she was. And also my hero at the time was Loretta Harrop, silver medal in Athens at the Olympic Games. Lived in Brisbane, trained out of the same center I trained out of in Brisbane. And so I got to know her a little bit. And so Siri and Loretta were best friends. Siri coached Loretta to her silver medal. Obviously, Loretta and Siri both were coached by Brett Sutton for a long time. But Siri, in that year, helped Loretta prepare and peak for Kona. She also coached Susan Williams. And so they got second and third in Athens. So Siri had retired. I think she was ranked number one in the world, retired the next year, started coaching. Long story short, Loretta actually told Siri that I was looking for a coach. And so Siri reached out to me, which I was kind of shocked by because I'd had some results and certainly in the US I'd raced, my first long course races and done really well over the half distance. I'd gotten maybe a podium, a 4th place in a World Cup. So I was sort of climbing the ranks in ITU distance racing, showing that I had some ability in long course racing as well. And yeah, she just reached out. And honestly, the email she sent me was what I was just kind of blown away by. She was basically like, I think I can make you a world champion. And it was just like, she was all in. And I'm like, I didn't have the confidence in myself that she had in me. So that was huge because at the time I was talking to a couple of other coaches and anyway, so she was in Australia and said, hey, come meet with me. Let's have a chat. And, I went and met with her and I'm like 100% I'm in. Let's do this. Because just if anyone knows Siri Lindley, she's larger than life. She has such a big personality. It feels fake, that positivity that she just shines, but I can tell you it really isn't. Like she was my coach for 10 years. I've known her for, almost 20 years now. And that energy she brought to every single session she turned up to. She would go and drive her car behind us for 5-hour rides. Like she was 100% invested in our dreams and I felt it. And so that's how I got started with Siri. And at the time she had a solid group like Sarah Groff, she had Lauren Groves, their Canadian Olympic athlete, Mary Beth Alice, my good friend Mary Miller, just some really solid athletes in her group. And yeah, it was a fantastic time. I came to Boulder in 2006 and trained with the group, and Siri was, coach, and it was a lot of fun. Hard work, but yeah, a lot of fun. And then we just sort of formed a really good relationship, like just a really good deep trust in one another. As we moved from initially my goal was to do ITU and try to make the Olympic team, shifted to sort of half Ironman, and then the 70.3 series popped up, and my focus was then really Kona, but using 70.3 as a vehicle to learn and develop before moving on to Ironman. And I mean, Siri had no experience in Ironman coaching. I had no experience in racing it. So it was sort of a bit of a leap of faith for both of us, but I think we just believed in each other so much, and that magic is really hard to come by in terms of that coach-athlete trust.
Sure. Sponsor of today's episode, Precision Fuel and Hydration. These guys have been an amazing partner for the show, and it's really a product that I use every single day in my training to help me go faster, feel better. So in today's day and age, we all know high carb is sort of the thing. And so previously I've spoken about how much I like the chews, and I'm still munching on those pretty much every single day in training, but I've really been getting into the PF90 gels. That's been a really big value add for me to have 3 gels in one. And I feel like sometimes I'll just take that entire gel all at once or go half and half. It just allows me to get a little bit more carbohydrate and sort of just bump everything up and feel a little bit better in training. So if you want to try that for yourself, head on over to pfnh.com and use code BigMetz2025 for 15% off. What was one physical element from her training that you felt like really worked, and what was one mental element? Because I know with series training, there's a lot of power, like the power of belief, and there's psychological components in addition to just the hard work.
Yeah, I think both, right? Like I think the training is secondary to what she brought for the emotional and mental side. And her belief was, she would leave no stone unturned. She would push us to our absolute limits in training 100%. She would test us mentally all the time and physically. But helping us believe in ourselves and believe in winning. And it wasn't even that we really talked about it that much. It was just like, this is how it is. This is what we're going to go and do. And we're like, all right, we're on board. That's what we're going to go do. And so I think it was more just being around that energy every single day, day in, day out, doing the hard sessions together, building a foundation, and then just believing that it was possible. That was the overriding factor. The program was solid. There wasn't, if you talk to her, she'll say there's magic in the actual sessions, but I don't think it was any different to what anyone else was doing. I think we were smart about resting when we had to rest. I think we did the hard sessions properly. We just did it right, It wasn't rocket science.
Yeah. I feel like in that type of environment, there's going to be a decent level of psychological intensity. And I think over time, if you looked at people coming in and out of that group, there were people that came in, there were people that left. What were the attributes that you needed as an athlete for it to stick and for you to stick around and for it to work?
I think belief was a big one. It was, and communication, honestly. Like, I saw a lot of athletes come and go in series program, and either they, it was almost like they had a falling out because there was miscommunication. And I think that for me has been something that I've done well in my life. I've had good communication with people. I am honest. If I feel upset about something, I'll go and talk to them about it and find out, hey, what did you actually mean but when you said this? And I think a lot of relationships go awry because something's said and it's never addressed, and then time goes on, something more is said, and that just gets built on and built on and built on. And then there's breakdowns, and then it's like, I don't even know why I hate this person, but I hate this person. And if in the first time you nip it in the butt and say, hey, I don't appreciate that, that made me feel a certain way. And I think that's something that I was really good at. And I think Siri was receptive to that. And so I think, athletes left and typically when athletes left Siri, it was a bad split. It was typically they left and it was almost Siri was hurt by them leaving, and then she did not deal well emotionally with them, walking away. And so then it was just like, you're out, like it's like an ex-boyfriend or whatever.
Sure.
And so, I saw that happen a lot, and I was like, guys, this is, we can work this out. But it obviously wasn't my place to step in any of those circumstances. But I think that's the reason why we did so well.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think a big component of that as well was just there was a group environment, and it seemed as though it was very female driven.
Yeah.
What was it like training with a group of females all the time, and how much did you immerse yourself in the group environment versus just working with Siri one-on-one?
Yeah, so when this first started happening, I had a lot of trouble. So there was a time where Siri and I did split. I should actually mention this part as well because it's a big part of our story, in that, I was with Siri at the beginning. There was a solid group. I was just one of the girls. Siri moved to LA with her girlfriend. Everybody left. They followed her, and then they're like, "You're not invested as much as you were before. You've chased this girl to LA from Boulder. You've moved us. This isn't as good an environment." And so pretty much everyone left her except for me. And so I stayed on, and then we got results, and then everyone wants to work with Siri. And so she was bringing on all my competitors. And so I'm like, what? Like, how is this fair? Like, why do you have to coach all these other athletes? And her point was, you having more competition in training is going to make you a better athlete. And I'm like, okay, but this is something we've built. They're coming to you because of what we've done together. Can I have a say in who comes or who doesn't come? And she was like, no, like, this is my thing. So we ended up having a bit of a bust up in around 2011. And I just said, look, I need to go try something else. At the time, I felt like the bike was my weakness. Well, the swim was my weakness, but I just felt like I had opportunity to get better on the bike, and I wanted to go and work with a bike coach. So it was sort of twofold in that a lot of women were coming into the program that were my competitors, and I felt that I needed to go and try something else because I'd been with Siri at that point for 5 or 6 years. And we'd won Kona. We got second in Kona. And I wanted to, win Kona again. So I moved away. I worked with a bike-specific coach for a year, and then I worked with an ITU coach for like 6 months, and I was not doing well. It was a different relationship. I think the program was phenomenal. I worked with Matt Steinmetz, and that didn't work as well because he just took care of my bike, and I did the swim and run. And, that's difficult because you're kind of like working against each other. Maybe the intensity on the bike takes too much away from the run. And anyway, I think I was a little burnt out by the end of 11. And then 12, I started working with Joel. The program was phenomenal, but I didn't have the same relationship with him. And it was showing up in my results. I really wasn't racing well. And so it kind of got to the middle of the year, and Siri randomly had moved back to Boulder the middle of that year. And so I just reached out and said, hey, can we talk? And we had a chat, and I said, hey, would you coach me again? And she was like, I would absolutely love to. And so because I'd left her on good standings, like, as I said, a lot of the breakups with Siri didn't go well. Ours was like, I love you. I just feel like I need to do something different. She's like, I wish you nothing but the best. But it still felt hard to go back and ask her to come back. But I knew that, hey, we had something magic in our relationship, and I think you're the coach that can get the most out of me and to get me to, back to the top of the sport. And and it was magic. I came back, I think, in 2013. I think I got my years wrong there. So I think it was the end of 11 when I left her. So beginning 2012. Middle of 13, I came back, and we won 13. We won 14 in Kona. But that was when the group was a lot of good women. We had, Jeannie was there at one point. I think there was Jodie Swallow, Jodie Stimpson. There was Amanda Stevens, Mary Beth Ellis.
Was Leanda there that year?
Leanda was there, which was hard for Leanda because she had just won. So she won 12. I came back mid-13, and I think that was hard for Leanda to swallow. So that was sort of a difficult situation that, I don't know, didn't go so well in the end. Leanda ended up leaving Siri at the end of that year, I believe. But it was great for me. I came back, and I came in, and I was just appreciative to be there, and was like old times. yeah, I was able to get back to the top and win that year. And I think coming back in, I just appreciated having Siri in my corner again. Whereas when I left, it was almost like why do we have to have all of these women in the group? So yeah, I mean, it was hard, but also it made me step away, which I think I needed to then enable me to race as well as I did in 13 and 14.
Yep. Did you always feel as though you were kind of top dog in that group at all times, and that maybe caused a rift with the other athletes? I mean, maybe Siri didn't say that, and it wasn't a communicated thing, but did you always feel like I'm the priority here?
I think so. Yeah, I feel like we just had such a good history and relationship that when I came back in, I didn't walk in the door thinking I'm top dog. I walked in the door thinking like I so appreciate being here. I'm excited to get to work. But over time, it sort of, we just fell back into our own old ways. And I don't know, the other women probably did feel that, Rinny's and Siri have something here that we don't have. But I don't know how I could have changed that. That was just sort of how it was.
Yeah, and I think inherently, look, we've both been with training groups before. Like, if you have an athlete who has the potential or is winning world championships, they probably have earned and deserve a certain level of trust, attention. The relationship's just firmer, I think, than maybe an athlete who's come in and has worked with the coach for 6 months. That's just life.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it is just life. But it was a very interesting dynamic there because I think that 13 Kona, Yvonne van Vlerken was on that team. So I think we had 5 out of the top 10 women in Kona that year. It was crazy. And obviously Leander, myself, athletes that had potential to be on the podium. Jody Swallow, and Jody was a big personality, very good athlete as well. So it was an interesting, and I just kind of almost laughed because I didn't care. I was just there to get better. And I'm and I think I was confident enough in my own abilities that in that environment, you can either lose confidence or you can thrive. And I think because I had a deep inner confidence, I was able to thrive in that environment and be like, well, yeah, I got my ass kicked by Jody today, every single day in the pool, on the bike or whatever. And I don't care. Race day is a different thing. Kona's a different thing. And I know I can race all of these women. Yeah,
you can kind of let them kill each other in training, and then you can elevate when the day actually matters, when there's money on the line. I
kind of loved it, actually. So I sort of came full circle in that I left because I'm I don't want to train with all my competitors to being I believe in what I'm doing. I believe in the program, and I think I can get it done on race day.
Yeah. So when you came back to Siri the second time, did you work with her all the way up until the point that you switched over to Julie?
Exactly. Yeah. So I worked with Siri through till basically she was done with sport, and I think I felt it So obviously I got pregnant in 17, had Isabel, took kind of a 6 or 8 months off racing, and then in 18, we came back and we raced really well. In 19, I certainly felt that Siri was starting to be pulled in different direction. So that's, she didn't have as many athletes, and she was starting to do a lot of motivational speaking. She was doing a lot of stuff with Tony, and it was really, that was what was calling to her. And I certainly felt that she didn't have as much invested in us as she had before. And it was sort of, I was pretty disappointed in Kona in 19. I actually was in phenomenal shape all year. I broke my arm 5 weeks out from Kona. And I still was hoping that I could race well. And then she just wasn't really there for me that weekend. And that was kind of the end of it. That was okay, she's done. I need to find a coach who's invested and excited. And obviously my husband, Tim, was working with Julie at the time. And obviously I love Julie, was a great training partner and friend of mine for many years. And here in Boulder is Siri. I think Siri was still here, but she was just moving more into her horse rescue and Tony Robbins stuff and motivational speaking. And so we actually sat down and had a meeting at the end of 19 or the beginning of 20 and was just like, I think we're done. And she's like, I agree. I was going to say the same thing. So it was like, it just sort of mutually came to an end. She was done with coaching. I was sort of ready to move to another coach because clearly she was moving away. And so anyway, again, a great mutual split. We love each other. I appreciate everything you've done for me. And yeah, so I think she actually might have still coached a little bit after that. But yeah, and then I moved on to Julie.
And why was Julie the next decision?
Julie was the next decision because I just saw how she worked with Tim. And I actually was already doing swim sessions with Julie. So Siri didn't have a squad or that I could go and swim with. So at that time, so I needed a group. And so Julie let me, pay a fee just to go and swim, as she does with a lot of athletes now. And I just love the way her energy she brought to the team, her professionalism. Obviously, I had a lot of respect for her racing days, and it just felt like the right fit for me moving forward. Like having a home group, and a coach that could have eyes on me all the time. So it felt like a really good shift.
Yeah. And where were you at in your career at that point? Because you had won world titles, you had your first child. Was the conversations with Julie, I'm going for another world title? Was it, I just want to get back to a strong level? Like, where were you?
If I'm completely honest, I wanted to, so my goal was to win one more Ironman event, and I didn't know if I'd go back to Kona again. Because at that point, Isabel was almost 3, I think. Or yeah, she was a little younger than 3, 2.5. And it was almost like, I want more than one kid. My plan was to freaking win 2019 Kona and then retire and have a baby. But obviously broke my arm, didn't get to finish that day. And I'm like, man, I've loved racing this year. I was in such great form. I know I can compete with the best in the world. I know I can get up, if Daniela races like she had a few times, maybe I can't beat Daniela, but I can get on the podium. Like I feel like I can do what it takes to do that again. But pandemic happened in 2020. And so my goal was to race St. George Ironman, and then decide if I wanted to go and do Kona or if I wanted to, retire and start a family. So the pandemic kind of made that decision for us. And then, we got pregnant and had Finn.
This is like an aside from some of the questioning, but you remember the training camp we did in Durango? You were pregnant with Finn, right? Yep. Yeah. That was like during the pandemic, we went down to Durango because no one was doing anything. And I remember doing you were doing these crazy rides, and you were probably like 5 months pregnant rolling out with us.
Yeah. So yeah.
You're still staying fit during that time.
Yeah, I stayed fit. Yeah. So I think because I didn't get that nice ending, I wanted to, have Finn, and then I had the eye on coming back and racing after Finn. Sure. And I thought, I'll go and do Ironman after Finn, and But then Finn came out, and I'm like, I think I'm done.
Yeah. Well, you still kept going a bit after that, right? So, I have some. I guess I want to back up just a little bit. Like when you decided to get coached by Julie, were you and Tim at all concerned that was going to impact his relationship with Julie, and you guys were going to be in that group training environment together and maybe spending more time together? No,
I don't think so. I think, we did talk about it briefly. Tim actually was like, you should come and work with Julie. So he was sort of not pushing me, but he was like, yeah, come and join this group. I think it'd be great for you. I think Julie would be great for you. And we did all sit down and say, okay, the way you coach Tim is different to the way you're going to coach me. And I want you guys to keep, because obviously Tim and Julie had been just getting better and better every year. And 19, second in the world for Tim, was in phenomenal performance.
Yeah, crazy.
And so, obviously didn't want to hinder any of that. So we just talked about how, to manage that and make sure we had good communication if anything felt like it was changing for them. But I don't think it really impacted the way she was able to coach Tim and then also coach me. Sure.
Do you think it is a coincidence that the 2 primary coaches that you had in your career were females as opposed to males?
I don't think it's a coincidence. I think for me, that's what worked. Having good connection, a good connection. I tended to, I mean, that's not to say that I couldn't have raced well under a male coach, but for me, I don't know. I feel like that was a better connection.
We should add Erin Carson in there as well as a female strength coach who's a big part
I mean,
of the team.
if you look at my team, I mean, I had Wendy Ingram, Shannon Delaney, my manager of many years. I had Erin Carson. I had Siri Lindley. I had powerful women all around me.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think that for me, that's what helped me get the best out, knowing that I had that team behind me.
Sure.
Obviously, Tim was part of the team too, but in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've got some general training questions here that I want to hear your perspective on. Across all the coaches that you've had and all the training that you've done, what's the best session or your favorite session of all time?
Yeah, I mean, this one's kind of well documented. My favorite session was always that sweet spot around 7 or 8 weeks out from Kona where Crowe was usually in town. Julie would join for that session. Tim would come as well. And we would do Big T, ride pretty solid and then come down into Lions and then time trial as hard as we could for an hour, max effort, hop off the bike and do 10 by mile. I would try to hold 6-minute miles, leaving on the 7:30, so up and down Monarch Road. That session is one that always sticks out in my mind because that was kind of this is my big test session because I did it pretty much every Kona build. And so feeling good and nailing that session just was like, all right, I'm ready. I've got this. I did it actually in California one year, the first time I ever did it. I think it was before 2010 Kona, and we went out and I rode all up through Topanga Canyon, Malibu, and I think I did the hour out and back, sort of pretty far north. Point Magoo, I think, is the rock area, and I did the run off the mile repeats on the PCH there. That's the first time I ever did that session and nailed it and felt amazing. Like it was one of those sessions where I'm trying to slow myself down on the run. I'm running too fast and this feels good. And Siri's like, okay, you don't slow down. So those sessions stand out in my mind as the big, tick that box. I'm ready to go.
I think I've told you the story when we were running or something. I always am thankful that you guys posted that with the Bob Babbitt chocolate milk thing because that inspired me to really take professional racing more seriously and kind of make that leap. Yeah, I remember watching those videos and being like, I'm going to be in Boulder one day. So it impacted me pretty massively. Another question that I have here is over the course of your career, who is your favorite training partner of all time? Because you've trained with so many people.
I have two. I mean, I have more than two. Julie Dibbins is one of my favorites of all time just because when she was at her peak racing, I was kind of at my peak too, and we sort of would go back and forth. And it was just a fun rivalry. She would have fun with it. I could poke fun at her. I could give her a hard time, and she would just throw it right back. And so, whether she was beating me or I was beating her, it was whatever. As long as we're winning. And then in terms of training, I think it was good in that she was clearly the better biker, and I was clearly the better runner. She was actually also the better swimmer. But it was there was no ego in it. I would go out and we'd run, and she'd be like, "Yep. Whatever, you're better than me." And then she'd go kick my ass on the bike, and it was great. And then another one of my favorite training partners is Laura Bennett, who used to live here and race ITU, an American Olympian. But yeah, Laura and I just had such a great, strong friendship. And there was no ego involved. We both wanted the best for each other. We'd go out and we'd push each other in sessions. And she was just always a really good, solid training partner. And then Crowe, getting to train with him, I think that was educational for me, just learning his calmness, relentlessness in what his pursuit was, but he didn't have an ego about it. He would just go out, he would do the work, he wouldn't have to talk about how good he was, he'd just go out and win. And just being around that was really good for me as a young athlete, just starting doing Ironman racing when he was already established and winning world titles. So obviously my husband was a pretty good training partner as well. I
can second that.
Yeah. I was so blessed to have good, strong friendships in the sport. and people who genuinely cared for me as a person beyond my results. And I cared for them the same. Sure. So I think that, having a good training partner like that is so important for athletes, longevity in the sport and just overall mental health. Like, go out and, you spend so many hours with that person riding bikes, 30 hours training a week, 15 hours on the bike. If you've got a really strong friendship, it makes those miles tick off real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the volume there. That's definitely, it's always a topic of conversation. If you had to take out the taper weeks and take out your off-season weeks, what would you say your total weekly average volume has been throughout the majority of your career?
If I had to take it, so I probably averaged around 80K running, well, maybe 70 to 80. And then on the bike, I was probably around 300 on average, and swimming probably 25K. So I was sort of high in the swim because I sucked at swimming. So I had to be in the water 6 days a week. But yeah, like probably around 80. I would always, at my peak weeks, I wouldn't run more than like 105K maybe. But I was always pushing up, 80 to 100K running, 3 to 400K on the bike, and, 22 to 30K of swimming. So that was sort of when I'm training, that was my sort of sweet spot.
Sure. Yeah. And would that change sort of in the final build up to Kona, or was it just about the consistency?
Honestly, I think throughout my career, it was the consistency that enabled me to race the way I was able to race. Just week in, week out, I didn't miss a beat. Didn't miss a session, obviously unless I was sick and I rarely had niggles. And if I did have a niggle, I would let it be known and take care of it right away. Like, I didn't screw around with anything like that. So that was, I think, the reason I was able to have longevity, and the reason I was able to have longevity is because I was consistent in my training.
You walked me through a day in 2025. Can you walk me through a day in your life sort of in that 2010 to 2014 period?
I think, so I walked through a day. Oh yeah. So 20. Yeah. So back then we would train early. We would usually swim first. We'd get up, swim at like 5:30, 6 or 7, depending on where we were in the world. And when we had lane availability, but generally we'd swim first, come home, have a quick bite to eat, and then get out on the bikes because, weather in Boulder in the summer, thunderstorms come in. So get out, go ride 3 hours to 5 hours, depending on the day, get off and run off the bike. And I would normally, or if I would swim in the afternoon, I would almost always have a nap in the daytime. So at some point in the day, I would have a 2-hour nap every day. So I'd probably sleep 8 hours at night, train in the morning, come home, eat breakfast, nap, go back out and train in the afternoon. If it was a double run day, get up, do the hard run in the morning, come home, eat breakfast, maybe go swim, or straight off swim, come home, 2-hour nap, go back out and do another session in the afternoon. So obviously that long ride day was sort of only twice a week. So I'd either do a 3-hour ride or a 5 or 6 hour ride. They were my 2 longer rides in the week. And yeah, other than that, it was sort of just filling in the gaps with what else needed to be done.
Yep. One more training specific question before we move on to the Kona specific questions. I feel like you always did a really good job, you and Tim together, of taking a proper off season. What is your perspective on the off season, and what mistakes do you see people making in sort of like their off season approach as a whole, their break, and then their ramp back into training again?
I think in general, you have to take a 365-day approach to every year and figure out where you're going to peak, what races you really want to nail, and work back from that. So for me, it was always Kona, for 10 years of my career, and I'd work back from that race and stick in my races that would lead into it, and everything would have a progression. So I had early season races up to sort of July. I always wanted to take a break in July, mental break, go away, don't bring the running shoes, bike, nothing. 5 or 6 days off, stay somewhere nice, do everything but triathlon, and come back fresh mentally, and then crush that second half after the season. And then after Kona, sometimes we'd try to tack on a race, but really we were mentally pretty checked out after that. And we would always take at least 2 weeks off. Siri would have us in our off season take 2 weeks completely off. And then it was like a 4-week build back. And in that 4 weeks, there was like 5 days of structured training. You can do it any way you want. So you can do 2 days off, 5 days on. You could do, sort of 2 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off. So however you wanted to do that. And it wasn't anything crazy. So it was really like 6 weeks of not really training before we got back into it. So that was like a significant break from the sport mentally. And I mean, I don't know. These days, the athletes, we'll see. I mean, a lot of athletes burning the candle at both ends, especially now that the Pro Series is happening and the Ironman Series is happening. That takes a really calculated approach to be able to emulate great performances year in, year out. And so we'll see how this year, maybe not so much this year, but 2 years in, how athletes are backing up and how they're doing it. But for me, that formula seemed to work well, and we just kept repeating. We had the mid-year break and we had the big off-season at the end of the year, and then we'd build back again every year.
What's your perspective on the athletes now who are burning the candle on both ends and seemingly doing great, just getting better year after year? Is it an old school approach to look back and be like, I need a 6-week break? Because my personal perspective is like, I tried to do that. I tried to skip the offseason 2 years in a row, and it ended in Achilles surgery. And I took 6 weeks off after my surgery, and I feel better than I have in like 3 years. So maybe it's just because I am old now in the context of who's still racing,
Yeah, I mean, I think it remains to be seen. I don't think it's there's a lot of technology that's come forward. The run technology. Athletes are able to, put in more nutrition in races. They're less beat up because of the shoes they're racing in from Ironman races. So athletes, therefore, are doing more races. But mentally, I think it takes a toll. And so I think athletes will burn out. I mean, when you go back, you talk to Mark and Wendy Ingram and all those guys. They used to race Kona, and then they just wouldn't do anything until January 1. They'd dust off the tri-bike. I mean, we had 2 weeks off. Yeah. We were back doing triathlon training, and I say it was 6 weeks before we were actually back in full force. But you're still training. You were moving along. You were getting the stuff done. You weren't taking 6 weeks off. But yeah, I don't think it's an old school approach. I think we're going to see some. I mean, you already see it. You see athletes that are amazing, and then they're completely screwed. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to put names out there, but I mean, you can sort of fill in the blanks with athletes. You're like, oh my God, this person's on fire. They cannot do any wrong. 2 years of just crushing everyone, and then they're gone. Yeah. And then maybe 3 years later, they come back. Could they have done better if they just raced a little bit less, took a little bit more care of themselves, and just scheduled their seasons a little smarter? I mean, there are some athletes I'm thinking about now that are taking that approach. You don't see them race as much, but I think they'll be able to keep rising to the top when it matters. But again, what matters anymore? Like, is a world title the best thing? Is a Ironman Pro Series the best thing? I don't know. Is the T100 the best thing? Like, what are we going to remember in 10 years? Yeah,
I think it really has to boil down to like, what are you motivated by, right? Mm-hmm. Like, a professional athlete's career is finite. You know that. There's going to be an end date at some point. You want to be able to reflect on your career and be like, I did what I wanted to do on my own terms. And so, I mean, I think you see some athletes now who are maybe getting pulled in financial directions, and they might be looking back and saying, ooh, that was my prime and I wasted it for an extra X number of dollars, which would be a disappointment from my perspective, and I can't speak for them, but yeah, it's just an interesting time.
No, absolutely. And I found that out really quick. So 10, I won Kona, and all of a sudden I had sponsors, and all of a sudden I had, plane tickets and appearance fees to go here, there, and everywhere. And I'm like, yes, I'm taking it all. I'm doing it all. I'm taking all the money, and I'm going to go and cash in, because I don't know if I'm ever going to win another world title, and I have done it now. And I didn't have a great 2011 World Champs. I had some nutrition, fly off my bike, which I think cost me in the end. But at the end of the day, it was a race that should have gone a lot better. Actually, no, that was 12, where the nutrition came off. Anyway, I just didn't race as well as I think I could have in 11. And that still haunts me to this day, because I know I didn't do everything perfectly that year because I chased money. And so that year I'm like, I'm never chasing money again. I am never going to compromise the training that I need to do to race well in Kona. And so, yeah, that dictated the rest of my career, and I think in a good way. Like, it took 1 year to learn that lesson. But yeah, for me, absolutely, winning that big race. And for me, my driving force was Kona, always was. To win that race multiple times was always my goal. And yeah, money was secondary to that.
Yeah. It's interesting to watch you speak about that because, you can talk about your world championships. Oh yeah, no, I won this year, I won that year. And they're kind of like lumped into a category, but the intensity when you're talking about 12, when you didn't win, it's a higher level.
Yeah.
And so that, you're thinking about that. So that's a learning lesson for anyone out there who's maybe not sticking true to what, motivates them. I want to spend a little bit of time specifically talking about Kona, where you were incredibly successful. Your career was made in Kona. What did you do differently? And this doesn't necessarily have to be a training question in the final build up to Kona that you wouldn't do, that you would save for Kona in the Kona build up.
Yeah, our Kona taper was always different. And first of all, like that race was mentally, emotionally, it was my everything. So it was different anyway. Even if I did the same taper, even if I did the same training, it was just different because I planned my whole year around it. The emotional high, or the emotions I had to just getting up for the occasion, right? Like there are some races you turn up to and you're like, I want to have that motivation and it's just not quite there. And then Kona, you're like, it's there. Like I have it. And I'm willing to just go to the ends of the earth to win this race. And that was that race for me. But for Kona, we would always make sure we raced 4 to 5 weeks out. I did a half Ironman. Muskoka was the race that sort of made sense for a number of years. And then later, Santa Cruz. It was always sort of sometimes hard to find a race, but I tried to race 4 to 5 weeks out. And that would be sort of the end of my Kona training. Like I was pretty much done all the work. And from then there were a couple of other key sessions, like key big sessions, but really I was starting to taper. So that's a long taper or a long time ahead of the race. And yes, like you do the half, you recover. I did one more big key session. Then I'd go into Kona. I would always go in 2 weeks early so that I could get my last long ride, which is 5 hours on the course, my last long run, 2 hours on the course 2 weeks out. And then I would always take a couple of days off 2 weeks out. So this was something that Siri brought in that I wasn't so sure about. And she's like, we're going to take 2 to 3 days off. And I was like, all right. So I was on the big island. Everyone's training their asses off. And I'm sleeping in. I'm watching Netflix. I'm like sitting, by the pool, doing nothing. Wow. And so for me, I took 2 days because I wasn't willing to take a third day out of the pool. And then I did a swim day. And I think, the third day I would swim, bike and run 30 minutes. 30-minute swim, 30-minute bike, 30-minute run just to get everything moving again. And then I'd go back into, hard run. And I felt amazing. So once I got everything, I had the rest, I turned everything back on. Couple of hard sessions, hard bike, hard run, last semi-hard long ride, last semi-hard 3-hour ride or whatever, and an hour run that last weekend before Kona, and then normal taper week. But I felt so amazing in that last week. And I think the confidence you get when you feel amazing on race week, you always want to feel amazing. And you don't have to feel amazing on race week to have a great day. But mentally, it's so much easier when you're like flying.
Yeah.
And that race week, you're like, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. Like, you're like a caged lion. Like, let me get out there and let me at it. And I think having those 2 days to just stop enabled me to get up for the races. It worked for me.
Yeah. I know like the best races I've had in my career, I feel great on race week.
Yeah.
And I know that.
Yes.
And it's kind of like you can talk to yourself and justify, everyone feels bad on race week and whatever, but deep down whether you've nailed the fitness and the freshness and everything is just sort of coming together. Like if you feel like crap 48 hours before, it's probably you're not going to right the ship in 48 hours. It's typically a bit deeper than that, or at least it has been for me. What would you do? Because you would go to Kona 2 weeks before. Was that enough for your heat acclimation, or were you doing things from a heat acclimation perspective beforehand?
I think that was enough for me, and it worked for me. I don't know if I grew up in Brisbane. We didn't have air conditioning. Summers were hotter than Hades, right? Like that, the summer in Australia was hotter than Kona. And so I don't know if that environment, growing up in that environment, training in that environment when I first started the sport was what stuck with me and I just was good in the heat, or whether it was just enough. They say it takes about 10 days to acclimate if you're in the environment. So Tim tried to emulate my program. It didn't work for him, but I think he would come in and he would train hard. And I would come in and I would do a couple of sessions and I'd have a couple of days off. So the training was done well in advance for me so that I could take that time, and it was all still in there. I think just having that basically 13 to 14 days on the island before the race was enough time for me to be ready to go and acclimate and race in the heat.
And what about your fueling strategy, like sodium, fluid demands? Was that something that was super calculated? Like you're doing sweat rate tests and sodium composition tests, or did you just sort of figure it out?
So way back when I started the sport, I was in the AIS, the Australian Institute of Sport. And with that, we had access to massage, sports nutrition, you name it, physiology, all the rest of it. But I became really good friends with the sports nutritionist, and so he helped me when I started doing half Ironmans. He built out a nutrition plan for the day before and race day. Worked well, and so once I stepped up to Kona, it was only natural that I'd contact him and say, "Okay, what do I eat? What do I do?" He basically just catered a plan for me with the nutrition. I used GU at the time, and I have never done a sweat test in my life. He's like, "Here are the current guidelines for how much sodium you would need to take in per hour." Just did that. Never had a problem with nutrition.
Yeah, it's really interesting because this is something I've been thinking about, and I was talking about it with Taylor Nibb the other day, and we were just talking about some of the science stuff because I'm really into all of that, and I think my theory is that the best athletes in the world have low sweat rates and low sodium composition.
Yeah.
They just do genetically. That's like, if there is a talent component, like maybe it's not, you have this massive aerobic disposition, but maybe you just don't sweat a lot. Mm-hmm. Maybe you don't lose a lot of sodium, and that's very helpful for a place like Kona.
Yeah, maybe. And I can't tell you if that's what the case was or not. I certainly feel like I sweat a lot. Like if you put me in a hot environment, then I feel like I sweat. My sweat rate is pretty high, but maybe the sodium content of that sweat is not very high. So maybe, that was something. But yeah, I didn't have – the only year I cramped was when I lost my nutrition in 12.
Sure, yeah. What was one thing mentally that you would say to yourself when you got on that run? Like, did you have a mantra or sort of any thought process when you would hear, hey, 14 minutes to Daniela up the road and you gotta chunk that out and go win the race?
That year was different. 2014, coming in, being defending champ, the pressure of the crown is heavy. And then getting off the bike that far behind Daniela, who was a rookie, obviously very talented, and we all knew she was coming. But to be that far behind, I was not positive coming off that bike. I was pretty like, what am I even doing here? This is embarrassing. And Siri was, about a mile in, crouched on the side of the road, like, you're in the perfect position. And I'm like, what race are you watching? And then I just was like, well, let's just see. I mean, I'm 8th right now. Like, let's try getting the top 5. So I just changed my mindset because it was like, I'm not going to win. Like, I got off the bike. I'm like, I'm not going to win today. And then I'm like, that was too much for me to, comprehend in the moment. And I'm like, okay, reset. Let's just see how far you can run. You looked after yourself well on the bike. Your legs feel good. And then changed my goal. My goal was top 5, and then top 5 became top 3, and then so all of a sudden I see Daniela up the road on the Queen K, and another chance at a world title. So that just kind of shows sort of it doesn't matter what position you're in, doesn't matter where you are, you can never give up until you finish that race. So that race was different. Other years, like in 10 was like a dream come true year. I swam at the front pack. Never did that since. Never did that before. Chrissy Wellington pulled out right at the, before the race started. And so I was like freaked out because she was in every single scenario that I'd played out in my mind leading up to that race that she had won the year before, like 3 previous years. And I'd finished second to her in my first year the year before. So all year I had her in my sights, her in my mind, and then she wasn't there. And like Tim wasn't racing, and he was sort of, with me when we found out. And he said it looked like I'd seen a ghost. My face was just white. And then Siri's like, nothing changes. You race your race, go do your thing. And I like swam out of my mind that day. It was the easiest race. I was in the front pack, so now I'm not chasing all day. So and I say easiest race, it was not easy at all. But in terms of where I normally get out and I've got to chase to catch the front pack, I was with all the big players that day. I mean, I think Rachel was up the road. Julia was up the road. I think Julie raced that year. Maybe she didn't. But anyway, there were a couple of women off the front. But at any rate, I was with all the main contenders, and I think I got off the bike and I was right in the mix and just executed a solid marathon and able to win that one. So that was a different mindset. And then 13, I was just ready to tear the legs off the race in 13 after 11 and 12 races where I felt that I didn't perform to my ability. I was like just ready to execute that day. And so 13, I feel like that was my perfect swim, bike and run performance on the island. And so that one was just being in the moment, just like being calculated, executing every single moment of that race to as much close to perfection as possible, and getting to the front of the race. I think I got to the front of the race reasonably early compared to other races.
Sure. Now, back then you were running low 250s, and I think a lot of the men at the time were running around the 3-hour mark, so your runs were always some of the fastest in the field. If you had given yourself carbon shoes then, what do you think you would have done?
I don't know. It's hard to say, right? Like, I don't know. I think certainly faster. That's my answer, really. Yeah. My goal was to run 248 since I started racing in Kona. I ran 249 in Austria once, but never got under. I think I went 250 and 30 or something. It was my fastest race in Kona on the marathon. But you think back and wish, oh man, I wish I had those carbon shoes. But I think it makes everyone run faster. So then my running, having to run, how much faster than the other women am I going to have to run to win still, right? Like I think everyone's just running faster.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it would be nice to have, a super fast marathon time in Kona, like recorded, but that just wasn't my time. And
the wins were
I'm
the
okay
important piece.
No, I think, the wins, yeah, they will win. I don't know. The wins come and go. Some years were windy for me. Some years were not. I feel like we haven't really had a super windy year for a while. I think because everyone's starting earlier and everyone's faster. So we're getting out to Harvey and coming home before, the real winds start to pick up. Yeah, whatever. I got to live my dreams, and that's enough for me.
Okay. Well, moving on from Kona here, I've got what I'm titling Rinny's advice column. So I've got 5 questions because I think you've done it all and seen it all. So I've got 5 questions here. The first one is, what is one thing you did in training that was a mistake and got you in trouble?
Training through illness. I once got a really bad stomach bug. And I took a day off. It was like it was legit 3 days of vomiting, and then, a day of vomiting and then 2 days of the other end. And then I took I don't even know, maybe I didn't even take a day off, but I tried to train through it and I was crushed. And I ended up having to take 2 weeks off after probably a month of trying to train and trying to find my way back, of just not feeling right, to then right the ship. So I learned from there that, okay, you get sick, you take time off, you take care of yourself. It's not worth pushing through.
Yeah, absolutely. What is one thing you did consistently in training that allowed you to have such great longevity and not get hurt and have such a long career?
No, I think just listening to my body and being honest with myself and my coach.
Yeah, that's a good one. For all the parents out there listening, how did you manage training full-time and bringing up a toddler? What is one piece of advice for parents burning the candle at both ends?
Well, we had an au pair when we had Isabel, so that was absolutely super helpful and needed because we were traveling the world at that time. But just trying to include them as much as possible. I mean, I was just at the gym with all 3 kids. It's obviously a public holiday here today, and they're not at school, so they all came to the gym with me. So just including them as much as possible, where possible, and being okay with missing a session here and there. One session won't make or break your season, and the kids are your number one priority. You chose to have a family, so they are the priority, but you can do both.
What is one piece of advice you have for young couples out there who are both doing triathlon?
Get your own teams. I think, I say that Julie did coach Tim and I at the end of our career, but we both had our own managers. We both had our own people that helped us, especially on race day. I think that's when it really became the big, or could have been a big issue. And that Tim had his team and his people helping him, and I had my team, and it was just like, you focus on you, let him focus on him. That's the best way to get your best performances out. And it took us a little while to figure that balance out because, you're with your partner, you want nothing but the best for them, you're thinking about them all the time, but honestly, the best thing for them is for you to focus on yourself. And it's only a moment. Those races, in terms of, day-to-day training, I think there's a lot of benefits in actually having a partner. And I think you just have to have good communication. Like, I'm smashed today. Can you please make dinner? Can you please clean up? I'll get you back, I promise. Having that nice give and take.
That's a good question that I didn't get the chance to ask earlier, but I was thinking, what was one thing in sort of like the heat of your guys' training that seems simple on paper, like doing the dishes or cooking dinner, that at the end of a hard training day, you guys just couldn't, it was just too hard?
Yes. Just every day-to-day living stuff, having a clean house, doing the dishes, cooking dinner. But again, I think having good communication with your partner is so important, and just picking up the slack when the other one can't, and making sure that's reciprocated, so it's fair and everyone's getting their time to get in the boots and relax and watch TV. And there's give and take in any relationship, but in triathlon relationships, that energy in the house is sometimes limited, and so really important just to communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice would you give a young pro who's trying to make a career out of triathlon?
I think young pro trying to make a career out of someone, just find a good coach that believes in you fully and is fully invested in your journey. And there has to be a really good mutual respect between you and your coach. I think having that partnership be super strong is just really important.
Yeah. Final question here in the advice column is, what advice would you give me? I don't know if you followed my my highs and lows over the last couple of years, but we've trained together for quite some time. What advice do you have for me now? I'm 31 years old. You're still feel like I got young legs left.
No, you absolutely do. I think for you, just making sure you take care of yourself through this return. I think you know that now at 31. And then, I don't know, I feel like for this year, don't have big expectations. Like, this is going to be your build back year, and then hopefully by the end of the year, there's no niggles. You're at a solid, foundation, and you can move into next year and try to, go out guns a-blazing. So I think you've found a good coach in Matt Hansen, and, hopefully that relationship is as strong as I talk about. And I think that will go a long way for you.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that is the case. We'll see if I can get over this injury, but I have very low expectations, and I don't have a lot of pressure to race, which is good. So I don't want, like we spoke about before the podcast, I'm not going to be back until you have something to say on the Ironman broadcast. All right. Well, before we wrap up the podcast, I'm going to finish with our rapid fire. So the rapid fire questions here, they're supposed to be rapid fire, but you don't have to be like super.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Who was one athlete that kept you up at night or motivated your hardest sessions?
The two, Daniela and Chrissy.
What is one thing people would be surprised to learn about you?
That I was once an extra in a Jackie Chan movie.
Filmed in Australia?
Yep.
Wow, that's crazy. All right. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Most memorable race in your entire career?
Well, I have a lot of really good memorable. I think 2013, I feel like I had the perfect race in Kona.
That's cool. And most memorable training session?
Yeah, those milers on Monarch off a long hard bike with Crowe and Tim and whoever else joined us on that day.
Was it the one they filmed?
That we did it that time, but probably not that one. I don't know. I did a couple. I think Crowe and I did it probably at least 3 times, so at least 3 years.
Cool.
So one of them, yeah.
What is one big goal you want to accomplish in the next 10 years?
Good question. I don't know. I need to sit down and think about what. Honestly, I just want to be a great mum for my kids. I want to see them achieve their own goals, be passionate about stuff. My whole kind of world is revolved around them now, and trying to, bring up amazing little humans. So my goal is to have 3 amazing teenagers. I don't know if those 2 words go together.
In 10 years, Izzy will be 17, right? That's crazy.
17, 14, and 11.
Wow. Probably don't want to fast forward this time.
No, yeah. I mean, that I feel like, my next 10 years is solidly ingrained in parenting.
Cool. And who's your favorite kid? No, I'm just kidding. I asked him and he said he had a favorite.
Yeah.
He wouldn't tell me who it was, though.
Yes, he says he has it. But I do not have a favorite kid. They're all equally the same. But yeah, he goes back and forth on who his favorite is in the moment.
The real question is, who do you think is the most likely of your 3 to follow in their parents' footsteps and become a professional triathlete? Tim's answer was Finn.
I don't know. Jury's out on the little guy, Jameson, because he's just obviously learning how to walk. I don't know. Finn told me the other day that he wants to be a nanny, a cowboy, and what was the third thing? And a singer, I think, like in a band.
Cool.
So, yeah. I don't know. Triathlon was not one of his things.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, Izzy's right now really interested in biking and running. But honestly, I couldn't tell you. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's all I have for today. We might have to do a part 2 because I had some questions in here that I didn't even get to, but I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for coming on.
No worries. Thank you.
Peace.